Welcome to today's episode of the Hungry Trilobyte podcast. My name is Aaron Bossig, and I'm going to be your host. Today we have the pleasure of talking with Arch Hall Jr., the star of such movies as Eegah and The Sadist, and a rock star in his own right and just an all-around really interesting guy. I have been waiting to have this discussion for a long time, so we're going to get right to it, and after that, another Geek Resources section. Let's go. And on mic today, we have Arch Hall Jr. How are you this evening?
Very good, Aaron. Very good. How are you?
I'm quite well. I'm excited to have you here. I have in front of me here a legitimate rock star, a legitimate movie star, a pilot, and a world traveler. So I don't even know where to start first. I like following your adventures on Facebook. You have the most interesting things to post on there. I guess I should just start off by saying I got to know you through your movies, so I should probably just kind of ask how you got started in that.
Sure. That's a fair question. And the answer is I was sort of born into it. My father, whose name is Arch Hall Sr., by the way, not to be confused with me, Junior, but he aspired to be an actor early in his life. And after growing up in South Dakota as a cowboy, actually a real cowboy, he went out to Hollywood and went out into. He was involved in the Pasadena Playhouse and a bunch of stage acting and everything. And then he also got an agent and tried to get involved in the movies. This is about 1931, 30, maybe 31. He actually hopped a freight train during the Depression and rode out, stayed in what they called then hobo jungles, which unfortunately I think have returned, but we call them something else. And he was just on the cusp of kind of breaking in because he was a strikingly handsome guy, a rodeo rider, and a true cowboy. And of course, cowboy films were very popular then, as well as a little later. But he had to return to South Dakota because of family issues and severe weather and illness. And so he abandoned that. And he only returned after he had gotten married to my mother. And they were married in 1934. So he returned in about 1936, I believe, 37. And then he became quite active in around 1938 in the early 40s, except the war, of course, came into play there. But he did a lot of films, mostly for Republic, a company called Republic. You're probably familiar with in early cowboy films.
I am.
And Monogram Films was another one, and there's some other independents. But they filmed pretty much around the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles there, which at that time was terrific open country and orange groves and everything. You wouldn't recognize, what it looked like back then, but I've seen pictures, very beautiful. Anyway, to make a long story short, the war came in, Pearl Harbor. He went in the Army Air Corps, as did many of his Hollywood friends that were also aspiring actors and directors and writers. So he didn't come out the other side for a few years and then went back and tried to reestablish himself. But, having a family and then having me, I came along. I'm an only child, by the way, I should mention that. Mm-hmm. But, having a family sort of puts a damper on a lot of things. So you have to get a regular gig. And that's what he sort of did for many, many years in many, many different diverse businesses. At one time, he was even asked to be a speechwriter in California, Sacramento, for the California Democratic Party, and he declined that based on some of the people involved at that time in politics in California. He didn't care for too much. He thought they were pretty slippery people. So, it was a good offer, but he turned it down. Mm-hmm. However, he never went back to films until he, I guess he was in his 50s. And so this really goes a long period of time. He was in radio, other things, but to make a long story short, he gets back in as an independent writer, producer, starting his own films, but really not knowing anything about the business other than what he had experienced in the late 30s and early 40s. So, first film he did was in 1959. It was called The Choppers, and I was in it. And sort of answer, how you came about getting in films. My father's is a passion with him, writing, especially writing, and so he kind of created his own. He returned to what he really loved and had a passion for. He used assets that were at his disposal, and I was one of them. So he, and I didn't volunteer anything. It's just what you do. If your father was owned a plumbing company or electrical contractor or whatever, you'd grow up probably sometimes having to go out and help dad and things like that. So that's how it sort of came about.
Okay. Okay, well that is really interesting. And you went from there. You made a couple movies. So did your dad choose your movie roles, or was that something that you kind of had a hand in?
Well, I think again, kind of returning to what using his background and his passion for writing and coming up with he had comedy shows on the radio. He was a live radio performer, actor, and announcer, straight announcer, news person as well. And would have transitioned into television, except for a few other problems he had. One being smoking. He had a terrible cough, and it became an issue. On radio, you can use a cough button up to a point, but on television, what do you do?
Right.
So his, unfortunately, his smoking habit, which he was up to like 5 packs a day, I think. In the height of the radio, and this is back in the Edward R. Murrow days, where everybody, the whole news.
Oh yeah, it was
clouds of smoke.
It's just a culture.
It was, and it, but there was a downside, and that sort of took its toll on him in making the transition, which would have been a natural one for him, making the transition from radio to television. But what was the last part of your question? Maybe I forgot it.
No, you hit it right on the head there. I was just asking how you managed to get the particular roles you had, because just looking at the parts you had, they would be very appealing roles for a young man, and much better roles than I would expect a early actor to get otherwise.
Well, I think he tried to be pragmatic too, and his company located in Burbank, which was sort of a compound of a combined office, apartment, commercial, partial residential building. It became sort of ground zero. We called it the compound, and he identified with people, other producers, other independents, people, many of them I can't quite think of right now. I mean, Roger Corman being one. Some others that they all talk to each other to a great degree, and they knew that their market primarily was exploitation films that were cannon fodder for drive-in theaters, which are a thing that people today, or young people anyway, don't really know much about. But it was a whole culture, the drive-in movie culture, and so these films, I would say, were aimed and targeted for drive-ins, although they played, of course, conventional walk-in theaters as well. But that's kind of the genre that he was in, and coming up with films that would be, or story ideas and scripts were based on sort of a combination of his outrageousness, his feel for comedy and the ridiculous, and then serious issues too. I mean, he loved South Dakota. One film he did is a Western. He got to return to the Badlands and where he grew up and everything, and he enjoyed that in a serious way. But that was what he was aiming at, the drive-in theaters. And these films, I made, I think, 6 films, and believe me, they played a lot of drive-ins. I mean, some of them were in big cities like Cincinnati, Cleveland, and they had multi-screen drive-ins, and they might be playing on 2 of 5 or 6 screens or 7 screens, and and it was big in those days. It was big. Now the properties are probably condominiums or golf courses or something.
I actually had a drive-in at the town I grew up in, which is one of the oldest ones left operating in the country.
Really?
Fond memories of that place, and that's one of the things I tried to get at when we're setting up here is just getting a handle on those kinds of movies. And you hit it right on the head when you said the drive-in culture. I didn't have a good way to describe it, but what do you think? What was great about making those movies that we've kind of lost today?
Well, making movies was not, first of all, it wasn't easy. And operating with, 35 millimeter film is a lot more complicated and expensive than shooting on in a video format, which a lot of people do. Of course, film was used too, of course, but that sort of separates the wheat from the chaff, because the film stock, the negative stock is expensive. The camera equipment is expensive. Finding somebody that's clever and talented to operate the cameras and things like this. He was lucky. He had not much, had some money, but it was a thing where I think his personality and his character, something about. I mean, a lot of people have bad actors and technicians have bad things to say about many independent producers. However, not many have anything bad to say about Art Charles Sr. And that was because he was straight up with people. He didn't have much money to operate from, but he wanted to give them a forum to show their chops and everything. And this is how he attracted people, very clever people, both on the technical side, and one in particular is, of course, the famous Academy Award-winning cinematographer Vilmos Zsigmond. My dad was the first one that gave him a chance to shoot a low-budget film, which probably, in many ways, now he's passed on, but in many ways, early on, he had to have something to do, and he had a way to break in the business. Tremendous talent, but it doesn't count unless somebody helps you get in through the door and get into the union, things like that. And my dad did that, and I think Vilmos was always grateful to him. Although probably some of the films like Eegah and everything, that wasn't his things that he wanted to point to proudly. But believe it or not, he was there, and I remember many cold nights. He slept in his car. I mean, like almost just maybe a step up from being homeless. So, he went on to, of course, be extremely popular and extremely successful, and a wonderful man, wonderful talent. But everybody's got to start somewhere. And he started along with a colleague of his, Laszlo Kovacs. And my dad used both of these wonderful Hungarian photographers, but cinematographers, I should say. What can I say?
Sounds like a pretty good guy.
Yeah, and it attracted a lot of good people. I think they were good. A lot of people were, they'd come out of film school or they were self-taught almost, or whatever you want to call it. People like Ray Dennis Steckler. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he was quite an amazing man and a talented man. Not in my dad's generation, but for some reason there was a simpatico where they both got along very well, and they were almost in sync. One could think of something and he would be in tune with the other. Ray would be in tune with my dad, and my dad would be in tune with him. It was almost eerie sometimes, but it was, and then everything, time pressure, and of course time is money when you're making a film, and sometimes we had pretty harsh conditions because we had rental equipment, we had rental sound stages, things like that, and we had it for so many hours or so many days or whatever, and building sets, and then we'd end up having problems getting all bogged down, but we couldn't leave. So it's like having a bull by the tail. What do you do? So I remember, at one point we had one major problems in a sound stage down in Hollywood. downtown Hollywood. And I believe when we finally wrapped up, we had no idea we were going to have this kind of difficulty. But we went 44 hours without just taking breaks and throwing water in our face and slapping our faces, trying to stay awake, you know. It was like sleep deprivation, torture. But most of the time, any problems we had, we'd sort of laugh off. But it was easier, especially dealing with the police and permits and things like that. And it was easier to beg for forgiveness than to ask permission and to make formal applications. So sort of guerrilla filmmaking. I mean, it's maybe done a little bit different now, and there's a lot more oversight and more restrictions. Back then, there was restrictions too, but we just did it anyway, and and most of the time got away with it with befriending the police or the sheriff's deputies they would send out. And the complainants, one time in Malibu, we were shooting Wild Guitar on the beach, and I'm not going to say who it was, but it was quite a famous movie star, came out and just screamed and obscenities and everything. And we were there doing, you know, we weren't on his property, but we were adjacent to his property, and he knew we were making a film, and he knew we probably didn't have a permit, so he was going to just make a big scene, and he did. And anyway, LASO deputy came out and asked for the permit and all of that, and we just did a kind of a rope-a-dope exercise. Meanwhile, we're still finishing up the last shot, because if he'd have kicked us off the beach, we would have had to come back, and that would have been more difficult. So we finished up the shot while a couple of people, including my father and Ray Dennis Steckler, and were kind of holding this deputy and entertaining him and introducing him to some young girls and everything like that, keeping him sort of mesmerized for a few minutes. And that's all we needed. I think it was about 25 minutes, and the resident movie star there walked over and was saying, "Well, what are you going to do? You're going to arrest them? You're going to, where's their permit? I want to see their permit." And anyway, they sort of diffused everything, and the complaining party walked back to his house and shaking his head like, it didn't make any sense. But the only thing my dad knew is that having a bunch of scantily clad young girls around in bikinis surrounding the sheriff deputy and saying, "Oh, you're so handsome," and everything like that, that buys you a few minutes.
It can only help the situation. It won't hurt at all.
It worked. And that deputy was very nice too. And the guy was so foul-mouthed and everything that he didn't really. He just told him, "Sir, just I'll come over and talk to you." And he did. He went over and talked. And I don't think he satisfied him. He wanted us arrest, booted off the beach or arrested or whatever. But he didn't get his way. We got our film in the can, and trucks loaded up, and we were beating feet out of there. So everybody was happy in the end. Nobody got hurt. So, it's all good. Right.
In school, I pretty much the only thing I learned film-wise was that if you get asked about the permit and you don't have one, your answer is always, "I think we have one." Because if you say yes, they'll ask to see it. But if you
right.
hem and haw, they just don't want to bother.
Right. We used to do that in aviation with overflight permits. You'd be coming from Dubai, flying to Bangkok, let's say, and you're entering Burmese airspace, or they call Myanmar now. It's the politically correct name. And anyway, they'd have you call Rangoon, and the first thing you'd ask when you called up on HF radio, which is very scratchy and everything. It wasn't satellite back then, or even you're too far away for VHF. So you hear, and they ask for overflight permit. And it's usually a long series of numbers and letters, sometimes letters, mostly numbers. And we didn't have any permits. So we would just read back a bunch of bogus numbers, or read it off of a card, or, look like a driver's license number or something, just some series of numbers that sounded like it was official sounding. It's possible. And by the time they would go and verify, first they put it down, then they'd have to go verify it. By the time they would verify it, we were already exiting Burmese airspace into Thai airspace. So, adios, amigo. frequency change, please. Yeah, okay, contact Bangkok Control 125.7. Bye. So long. But that permit, click. Oh, just hang up the phone. So that works in various different industries, I guess. But we had some interesting times. Harpo Marx came out one time, and we were filming just behind his property in the Palm Desert, California area. And he knew exactly what was going on, but he came up, and of course, a couple of people recognized him right away. And Ray Dennis Steckler walked over to him, and I think he said, "And what's going on here?" And he said, and Ray said, well, we're doing a documentary. It's an educational thing for the Department of Education in Coachella Valley or Indio or something like that." And Harpo Marx said, "Don't lie to me. I know what you're doing." It was funny, but he said, "It's okay. Go ahead." He said. So everybody's reactions were different, and we had a lot of fun. Sometimes it was tough, but 122 degrees in the shade, in the desert there, trying to shoot a film, and things are so hot you can't even touch them hardly. Things that are black, like camera equipment, film magazines are so hot they're just scorching your hands. Because that's in the shade. The official temperature is, if it's in the sun or on the tarmac, you put anything down without a cover over it to shade it or try to get some, and it's way up there. It's ridiculous. And I don't know what point the film is damaged, but I think there is some temperature that, if you have it's up to 200 or something, I think you're, but that's unlikely. But 140 is can do that easily. Top and stuff. Anyway, that was a bit of our experience with having permits and permissions, and sometimes we did actually have permits, and when it wasn't difficult, and the local government was I remember Glendale was actually pretty friendly. Glendale and Pasadena were friendly places, but you get into Hollywood and Los Angeles County or Malibu, then it got a little more sticky at that time. So today it's probably 100 times worse, but they probably have a whole department just dedicated to filming and permits for TV and film crews and everything doing that. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've done any of that, but I can only imagine that somebody is still asking somebody for a permit somewhere.
I can guarantee you that. I wonder how much of the California's legal fees get paid just in permits. I mean, really.
Don't know. Yeah, it's a good question.
But you said your dad was a writer. You wrote a book a couple of years back, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. It was it's sort of a naughty, erotic book, and I did it for, you might say it's sort of a vanity publication. I wanted to do something, and I got a manuscript finished, and I sent it around several places, and of course got turned down, but actually got a couple that said, yeah, we're interested in everything. I said, okay, here's what I want to do. I'd like to, this, and they said, whoa, stop right there. What are you talking about? I said, well, I have some ideas. I want it, a paperback format, but a high quality, No. You don't get it. We're in the business. You don't know anything. They said, if we, want to proceed with your manuscript, it would be a hardback at first. The copy would be published as a hardback. And I said, no, I don't want that. I said, that's not the way the business works. And I said, well, I don't want to do that. And I said, well, then adios, pretty much parted company. And I realized there was a lot, and there still is, of course, a lot about the business. And of course, the whole industry the publishing business is completely been put on its ear by ebooks and things like that, Kindle. And so a lot of times writers now, and I know a few writers are very, very prolific writers, and they sell throughout a variety of outlets, but they also sell their books as ebooks. direct to the consumer, and that's pretty neat. I mean, so there's some revolutionary changes of the old way of doing things, and it's not all bad. A lot of it is very good. So, but that's the only. I've got a couple of other manuscripts that are, you might say, half finished, but I've held those in abeyance. And however, I got back together with a friend of mine who's a very good writer, screenwriter, as well as a journalist, investigative journalist, and he and I have come up with a complete new story based roughly on many of the characters in my book, but as it turns out, it's really a neat script, and we only finished it just a couple of weeks ago, so we're pretty much jazzed on it. So I have a new property to begin schlocking around, you might say, to the right people. But it's not for everybody. So I've got a few select people that were waiting to see it, and then others that I have plans to send it to people and all that. So we'll see, But it's fun, and I can see there must be some DNA or something that I got from my dad, because I love it. It's really, writing and coming up with characters and dialogue and things. It's something, there's a very visceral enjoyment out of, especially when you're working with a co-writer and you're both getting a kick out of it. And so I think I'm not just some sort of a weirdo that, but I mean, other people say, no, that's really good. That's awesome or something. It makes you feel good, so. Mm-hmm. Anyway, since I don't fly the big iron jet anymore, it gives me something to do, keeps me off the street.
Well, I'm sure you don't want to give away too many details, and there's a lot that you can't talk about, but I just want to let you know that I'm very interested, and I'm going to be looking forward to seeing what comes of this. So whether it takes 2 months or 2 years, you have somebody who wants to see this made. Okay,
Aaron, I appreciate that, and I will keep you informed, keep you in the loop for sure.
Will do. Thank you. How about we start wrapping this up while we're ahead here?
Okay.
But, where can somebody keep tabs on you if they want to keep track on your adventures and your writing and things like that?
Well, I have a website that really is kind of dormant and stale. It's not a very good. It's just sort of a contact point. archhalljr.com. Very original, right? But anyway, that. But other than that, mostly I've used, and I guess I'll continue to use it, is Facebook for initial contacts and sort of people to get in touch with me. Yeah, and that's sort of how I operate. It's not really complicated, probably much for other people too. So at Facebook, and it's Arch Hall Jr. On Facebook. Unfortunately, there's probably a lot of bogus Arch Hall Juniors, but you can probably figure out the right one by, just checking it out. But unless it gets sabotaged in some way, I'll keep using Facebook, or unless I'm. Anyway, I enjoy it, but it does suck a lot of time, and things that I should be doing, especially rewriting and editing and doing some things. Sometimes I'll get engaged with somebody on Facebook, and it's a time waster, to be perfectly honest. But I enjoy it for the socializing of it.
It's a good way to keep in touch with people you can't talk to otherwise. And you and I would probably have never met if it wasn't for Facebook. So I'm thankful for that.
Me too.
Okay. Well, have yourself a good night and take good care. And I will talk to you soon.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you.
I want to have you back on the show.
Thank you.
I would like to thank Arch Hall Jr. for being my guest today, and I would really, really hope we can get him back soon, because there's a lot more he and I could have covered. For the sci-fi resources part of the show, I want to mention that this resource is not specifically a science fiction fantasy resource, but it's so useful that I can't ignore it, and I do have to strongly recommend you go and dig through it. The organization leaves something to be desired, but this website should be on your bookmarks folder. It's archive.org, O-R-G. What this is the Internet Archive. This is a giant, giant database of things that are just found on the internet, old movies, old songs, public domain features. You can find tons and tons of movies there that are just sitting there waiting to be downloaded. Documents, books. And here's my personal favorite feature. You can find recordings of old websites that are no longer on the internet or have disappeared from the internet or might have just changed so much you don't remember what they used to look like. It's a great way of looking up old forum posts. This is a time machine for the internet, and I strongly recommend you go there, check it out. It takes a little bit to really understand how you can find the good material because it's not that well categorized, but the sheer quantity of resources begs to be checked out. So please go ahead and check out archive.org, which will be in the show notes as well. As always, you can get the show notes at www.aaronbossig.com. And as I close out, let me leave you with a community building tip. If you would like to comment on our shows, you can actually do that at my website, www.aaronbossig.com. That links to my WordPress page. And every show has an entry where you can leave comments. That would be a great way to give me feedback, suggestions on more material, tell me where I screwed up, talk to other people who have been enjoying the show or not enjoying the show as the case may be. So thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.